it might discern how many floor levels there are based off where the windows are, but that I don't know for certain, right? And so we take a vertical slice through that house, right? And that's a section. And that's really kind of the bread and butter of architectural drawings or sections and plans. And the elevations are kind of almost an afterthought, to be honest. They're important, but the sections and the plans describe the space, the volume that, you know, of the element. So today what we're gonna do is I'm gonna ask someone first, a brave soul, to come up and draw the front elevation using these three colors. So we have a heavy, which would be for ground plane and elevation. We have a medium, which would be a closer element, and a light, which would be that further away. So with these two apples in here, could I ask someone to come and use all three line weights and draw the elevation? You can just do the profile outline. Kim? Thank you. Oh, maybe I need to, is that a crack or?
Yeah, it looks like
it's
it.
a crack.
Oh gosh, yeah, I need to build a new one of these or something. Wonderful, ground plane.
Is this for a closer one?
Yes, the medium line weight, yep. I like the stem.
Mhm.
Oh, the dash line, look at you
Yeah.
go, wonderful. All right, so as you can see, as you remember with our west and south elevations, the only heavy line weight that we have is the ground plane, right? Okay, so what happens when, you know, and you can relay maybe the apple to your bridge, right? What happens when in plan, I cut a section through it, right? So I'm gonna draw a section marker, and it's just gonna be a line, and this is very much akin to the lines I did yesterday, or Tuesday rather, that we're cutting straight through either, I said through the middle of the zone that'll be your stair, or the zone that will be your bridge, remember? Okay, so imagine that that's that line, and I'm gonna say, this might not register right now, but just hang in there with me. I'm gonna have the section tail, as we call it, is pointing this way. So what that means is that the section cut's happening here, and we're gonna look on this side of it. If I were to do it this way, then we'd be looking at the other half, okay? So, operatively, what that looks like. This is my surgeon skills.
That's a juicy one.
That's a nice knife. Real.
Yeah, we
And you have
have
to
like
crunch
all
the
these
big
things
one.
left over from faculty parties, and this is actually from the English department. Bunch of old knives. I
Of
don't
course
know.
not.
Yeah. So we're not as fancy in architecture with old knives. So okay, so that section cut literally means instead of taking the view from here, from the outside of the box, we're actually taking the view from that line. Okay. So maybe I don't think it's gonna stand up on its own, but maybe it'll.
Oh, yeah.
It's got its little friend there. Okay, so what happens now is that anything that interacts with that section cut in form then now becomes a heavy line weight, okay? So the black is going to take the ground plane, and it's actually gonna pick up, and then it's gonna go around the profile of the apple and then come back down. And there's actually not gonna be a line where the apple hits the ground plane, because that section cut line shows that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so, and then that's behind it, now that I'm taking the view from here, the elements in the back are not really gonna be light, this apple wouldn't be light anymore, because it's closer to the cut plane.
It would be medium.
It would be medium, yeah. So does anyone wanna volunteer to draw the section? Very nice.
Wow. I will do this. And then, but what about the second one, since that one is further down though? Would that be on the plan of the line?
You mean this one?
Because that one is
So
further.
this one is not interacting with the
That's what
section
I'm
cut,
saying.
right? So that's not gonna be a heavy.
No, I know. My point is
This
it
line
on
here?
top of the line of the ground
No, you're
as
good.
well, or
Yeah,
the
it is,
shop? No.
it's sitting on it, but it's gonna be further back.
Okay.
So right now you're actually cutting through, the floor of the box as well.
That's
So
what
all of that looks good. I will say one thing though. So
It's heavy, right?
that hole
Mhm.
actually is there because there's a void, right? So imagine, it's hard to think, but there's a little void where that seat is. So that should be a heavy line weight, right? That's gonna be, very good, wonderful. As if, for example, this house were solid,
Mhm.
that little seed pocket is a room.
Okay.
So that would be heavy, so you're doing that right. But if there is any additional information, like if she wanted to, for
Put a wall.
instance, kind of, or even distinguish kind of the patterning, like there's a little bit of a striation here
Mhm.
happening, or whatever, that would be a light line weight. So it's kind of, if I put it into terms of construction, if we cut a section through the house, right, the outlines of the walls are gonna be heavy, but anything inside, like insulation and those kind of things that actually happen in walls, that would be light or lighter.
The
Okay.
insulation in there. So it's
Yeah,
like
so
lighter.
then,
And like the studs.
yeah, and like, for example, like this, we're not actually cutting through the seat pocket, so I don't know if that would be,
So a room in a house elevation, like cut vertically through, it would be medium, you said?
so yeah.
Showing like a room, like
Yeah,
if you
let's,
cut right through a house.
so let's say this is a section of a house.
Mhm.
One thing, you see the ground plane, the heavy line weight just does that,
Mhm.
right? And so typically, you have a little bit of a raised
Mhm.
foundation here, and I'm not gonna draw any windows at this point. Right, and then you've got, let's just say you've got your attic space.
Mhm.
So all of that is heavy,
Mhm.
right? And so what I'm saying is basically the information that's in the wall, we won't get to it for this, it's more simplified.
Yeah.
But like, say, usually you see insulation like that, it's
Uh-huh.
like this little squiggly lines.
Just representing it.
Yeah, and that would be a lighter line
Light-
there.
lighter one.
And then, for example, if there's, let's say windows beyond, you continue to like draw almost an elevation. These are interior windows, right?
Yeah, on the other side of the
On the
house.
other
yeah.
side,
Okay,
yeah.
Okay.
In a
Okay.
light. What
Yeah.
about a room though? If there was a room, would it be in light too?
So
or medium?
if you're cutting through the room,
Oh, okay, I see. So it's the
you would just show,
that there's just like a little area.
Like there's a
Oh,
wall
okay.
in there.
Yeah.
and there wouldn't be anything there.
Oh, okay. And then
Okay.
it's the-
And then even, if you're cutting through a door, which typically you wouldn't do, but usually the door is a little thinner.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
not that double line that I'm doing right now, but like that, okay?
Nice. Yeah.
Alright,
That makes-
so, hopefully that helps. So Sandra, you did a lovely job. The only thing I'll say is you typically, if you're following the section line of the ground plane, you should be able to basically go around and pick up and around like that.
Mm.
So that line doesn't have to be there. Okay?
Mm.
And I think, I see that a lot with undergraduates, they'll draw a line, right here.
Mhm.
And that's not the case, right? Because the section cut is cutting through that whole thing as a volume. So, for example, what you would also see in a construction document is, say this had concrete footing. I wouldn't draw it as black because I've already cut the section cut outline.
Mhm.
I would draw it as red. Like that. I know that looks really funny because you guys know what footings look like,
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, what are they gonna do?
Yeah. So usually what happens is you have
Oh, like,
columns,
inside the ground itself,
right, and
right.
you know, the structural engineer determines the kind of base that they sit on, but these columns go all the way down, this building, this steel, go all the way down to the ground, and there's concrete footing there. And it's typically a broader span, it doesn't
Yeah.
just meet at the same width, so it's like that.
Yeah,
You guys will get to that in tech, you don't have to worry about that now, but,
yeah.
it's a good illustration for section to do it, but, it would go
Yeah.
like that.
Just the
Mm.
section.
Yeah, and, you know, one thing to think about is like, sometimes in a section, the stuff that's cut through is all pochade, right? So, I'm sorry, you'd have a line there with a little bit of a void, but, yeah, that would be interesting to kind of draw through, okay? I won't have you guys pochade the section this time, but it's either, you can see here that where that section cut is actually colored in.
Yeah.
Located their bridge and or their stair zone.
I'll be honest, I was confused about that.
I tried.
Alright, so today I'm gonna go through and, I think we'll have enough time because the demonstration's at the beginning, there's nothing else to kind of take, go through. I'll come by and make sure we have that established, okay? So today, what you're going to do is, when you're drawing the stair section, you're not gonna include the stair, but you're gonna draw all the other elements, okay? And then the bridge is really gonna be kind of more akin to the section that we studied today, okay? So, in this demonstration, I'm gonna let's start with the stair section, because I think that's more simple, and then we'll look at the bridge. Alright, so my stair is, I don't know how long it is, right? I haven't determined the total rise, which means how high we have to go to get to that stair. But I know it's gonna be somewhere in that zone. And I know that my stair has to be the same width as my bridge, okay? So I determined my bridge location. Does anyone remember how or why I put it where it is?
Cause they overlap, right?
Exactly, so this is where that plane and that plane overlap,
Okay, I see.
and so that was kind of an ideal
Stairwell.
situation, exactly. Some of you guys might not have that, cause inherently you needed to have an outlier for this to happen. And if you don't, we'll work through it, but a lot of times what we do is we connect two edges of planes or something, so it'll be fine. But anyway, that's how I determined it, and does anyone remember what scale we're in?
1/4 inch square.
1/4 inch, yeah, so if I were to measure this is 3.5 feet, which means, in quarter scale, an inch is 4 feet, right? So this should be 7/8 of an inch, cause it's less than, but it's 3.5. So I'm about an inch wide, in terms of the real scale of my bridge. So, what I need to do first for this stair section is draw, again, a line, a marker through the middle, okay? And the tail of the section on my overlay, right? This is, you're not gonna necessarily keep this, but you need this, it's good to have to reference, is gonna be pointing up that way. And typically, the tail's gonna point in the direction of the drawing, okay? So, here what I'll do is, what I always say is again, I don't know why I always go to video games. I didn't play any video games, my brother did, but anyway, or does. And basically, I walk the section line, right? Okay, and you'll see it more when we get to the bridge. But I'm gonna say, what am I going to hit, or what I'm gonna run into next? So as I'm walking along the section line, right? What surface am I actually on or hitting?
The column.
No, I'm not touching the column, right? I'm
Not
on the ground plane. Yes, yeah, wonderful. So essentially whatever this section marker goes through, that indicates to me that I'm gonna be drawing a heavy line for that element. So as I go here, I know that, this ground plane is going to be heavy all the way until I hit this point, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and draw a heavy line, right? Okay, so now, what am I intersecting here?
The bridge.
The bridge, yes. And just like that section cut line as it cuts across and then it hit the apple, we had to draw the outline of the apple to be heavy, right? So that means, this indicates to me that I have to draw the outline of the bridge to be heavy as well, okay? And so now we have to do the tricky part as to determine where the bridge is, okay? So let me go back and get my elevation, sorry. Real quick compare, right? So let me make sure it's oriented correctly. There's red and there's blue. Okay. So my bridge crosses from this plane, right, which is the yellow, to this blue right here, right? So one thing to mention that might not be in the instructions is that the bridge is a 1/4 inch in real scale, a 1/4 inch thick, just like all of these elements here, okay? And so I'm gonna say that I want my bridge to actually be in this bottom zone here, and it's gonna go from the bottom of this plane and then die into this blue plane beyond, okay? So, again, just hold with me, it might not register, but essentially my bridge is in this zone right here.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's coming back, so we're cutting through it here. So with that, what I do is, I'll go back up, and the bridge starts right here, and I know it's in this vertical zone, and I determined that, okay? And you'll all have to determine that as well, but I know for certain in plan that its left hand edge is here, and its right hand edge is here, okay? So I'm gonna go, and I'm gonna do a heavy line weight around the perimeter of it. Okay? Any questions with that? No? Why is it so small? Cause I arbitrarily said it's gonna be a 1/4 inch thick. So it's long, but it's basically a 1/4 inch thick, which in, quarter scale means it's like 3 inches, so yeah, it's pretty small. But I think it'll be, oh, I'm sorry, no, it means it's a foot. Excuse me. So a foot is pretty decent size. And so then, as I go, I still have to draw the ground plane underneath it, right? Just like, when Emily was talking about the outline of the apple, right? Even though the apple picked up here, right? We still had to draw that heavy line here. Does that make sense? So I have to draw the ground plane underneath it, and as I go along the section, I am going to have a section of the stair next week, but for now, you're just gonna extend the ground plane here. Okay? So that's all my heavy line weight, and I suggest starting with your, once you've got everything laid out, I suggest starting with your heavy line weight and then going from there, okay? Alright, so as now, I do kind of the part you're more familiar with, I draw the elevation. But I'm not drawing anything behind that section marker. I'm only drawing anything in front of. So what is in front of this piece that I need to pick up or put in the drawing? Say it again?
No, just paying attention.
Oh, okay. So what's in front of here?
The column in a wall.
Yep, the column in the wall, right? And that's all I need to draw. I don't need to draw this column, and I need to draw this wall, cause it's behind the section marker. So, go back to the strength. Okay, so, this column, right, I know is gonna span the whole height, right, cause we're always at that 11-inch mark. And then this plane here, it's gonna hand me my scale in my box. I'm gonna say it probably goes in inches. Sorry, I didn't realize it was closed. You like the outline? Yeah. I don't know how you set this. Yeah, I don't know how you did that actually, or why you did that. Alright. Okay, so it's 1 inch above the 1/4 inch mark, so I have to make sure. Just for my reference. Right. so I'm gonna go in and I'll use a medium line weight or a light line weight depending on how far, but it's pretty close to the suction cup plane, right? So it probably would be a medium line weight. And I'm gonna go ahead.
Are you speaking in the same scale or are we
They're in different scales. So this is a.
Quarter inch scale,
Oh,
right?
I'm sorry. I draw the top of it. Yeah, so this is quarter inch scale. So again, if I were measuring this in 8 scale, this bridge would be 2 feet, right? Basically 200% drawing right now, but right now, if I'm on the quarter inch, it's a foot wide, which makes sense for a bridge. And then again, this feels a lot heavier than it should be. This should be probably more heavy than this, but I'm not changing it my head, okay? And then I'd go in and I draw this plane, which I'm gonna say, and this starts on this side and goes up an inch, and I didn't have to measure that, because remember I referenced my outlier there before. And that line is not gonna cut through the bridge. We're gonna leave that, that should be essentially right in between there. So I picked up the line, and then I started it again there, so that's really just a guideline there.
Why is it in different scale?
Well, that usually does not happen, but one, I wanted you guys to get familiar with one scale that you didn't think 1/8 was just the only scale in the world.
So why can't it be both be the same different scale?
Well, because in purposes of this exercise, if it were 8th scale, you'd be drawing a really
No,
tiny
I meant
stair.
quarter scale, like both of them quarter scale.
Because I wanted you to practice drawing different
Different
scales.
scales.
Yeah,
Yes,
when
yes.
That would
yes.
never happen in real life.
Yes, it would.
No, it would never happen, and, well, the element would never change scales. Like, you would draw the element in different scales, but it would get smaller, bigger, based off of it. But this one is staying the same size, even though we're switching up scales. Yeah.
I'm just wondering why
Yes.
you're doing something that doesn't happen in real life.
Well, no, you do use a lot of different scales. right?
Sorry.
You
Like,
do
as an
use a lot of
architect,
different
so you have to
scales,
be familiar
but
with
we
them.
would be scaling, if it was a quarter inch drawing, and these elements were to stay the same size, it would be 200% bigger, okay? But for purposes of drawing the stair, going back, it would just be harder for you to do a very small
Yeah,
stair,
1/8 scale is really cool.
okay? So, yes.
I completely
Alright, so anything in front of, so remember this was your south elevation, right? But your south elevation is taken essentially from a section cut off of the page, so it's an elevation, because you're not cutting through the elements. So we're moving that section cut, or that vertical slice, all the way to this point, right? So we still have work to do after we draw the section cut, because we still have to draw elevation past that point. Just like in this house, right, we have the section cut line, but we still have to draw the elevation, the interior elevation of that space. So this is the same thing. Anything in front of the section cut line, we still have to draw. And so the only thing that is in front of this line is that column and that plane. This column, that column, that
Can you move a
plane,
little
and that
bit to the
plane are all
front, please?
behind the section cut line, so I'm not drawing it.
Thank
It's just like when you're drawing that house, I don't care what's happening on the east elevation, because I'm past that point in that section, okay?
I was like looking, but I wasn't looking.
No, it's a good question.
It was just there.
It's wonderful, very good.
So this is a south line?
No, so this is based off the south elevation, but this is gonna be your stair section. Or we could call it your east-west section, and So that's the line that you're following, and that indicates anything behind it I'm not drawing, anything in front of it I am drawing in elevation, and anything that it's slicing through, I draw with a heavy line. So it's slicing through the ground, and it's slicing through this bridge, so that's why those two elements were drawn with heavy.
I don't understand why we do the ground because it's at the bottom. So why does that carry over?
Because that slice, it essentially, I just slice through the element, which is the apple, but you would imagine going it all the way to,
Oh, like
the core of the earth, right? So like, for example, in this section, I don't stop the section cut at the floor, right? Sometimes you wanna know what's happening below, right? But that ground plane essentially is kind of solid material or mass, so that's where that outline. But if there were, say, a manhole, right, and I was wanting to draw that, yeah, or a bomb shelter or something, right? That would be
Septic
drawn, yeah, or septic tank. And I were cutting, the section cut was actually going through it, that void would be shown there,
Yeah.
okay?
Manhole. Never even heard of a manhole.
so
Anything
it's like
else?
a horizontal cut line, like going.
So it's a vertical cut line, yeah, and the plan's horizontal cut line. So muffin top cut off or apple core cut through.
One horror movie when the guy gets like, and then they like separate him when he's like all little pieces.
So-
Bro, I.
What horror movie?
Yeah.
Don't make me so
Yeah.
confused. Are you
Gross.
talking about the bodies exhibit?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Have
but
you
those
seen
are like
one of those?
Alcatraz,
Talking about
or,
cubism?
like, Jigsaw or something.
South or the bridge section, okay? So again, you're going to be concerned, you're gonna draw that line right through the bridge over your overlay, so that you could visually have a reference, but it's always good to actually, you could mentally have a reference, but it's always good to have that drawn, so you don't forget. So again, anything in front of that line now, I'm gonna draw, and anything behind it, I'm not. So for example, that column, I'm not gonna draw anymore, right? But this column, the side of that plane, etc., I'm gonna draw, okay? So this one gets a little more tricky, because I'm gonna be cutting through a lot more elements. As you see, you can already tell I'm gonna pick up cutting through this blue plane, and then I have to draw my bridge as it crosses from the blue plane to the yellow plane, which I have to draw in section, and then I'm home free. Okay. And all of that is also going to be above the ground plane, Emily, as you're asking. So first, let's go from here. I'm gonna follow this line until I get to this point, and I'm not cutting through anything except the ground plane. So I'll take a heavy line, and I'll go to here, okay? Now, that line is interrupted, or intersects rather, this blue plane here, okay? And I already have all my handy reference planes drawn, and I know that this blue plane, it goes up to this point. So I'm gonna actually draw the face of it, so it's like a little ant or walk marching up the wall with the heavy line, okay? Make sense? So I have it to that point. And then I decided that the bridge is going to start at this point here. So I'm gonna draw the top of that plane. Again, it's cut through, so I'm gonna be drawing it in section with a heavy line. And then I'm gonna go back down. And now I'm gonna go to the face of my bridge, okay? So at that point, I know that this bridge spans from this line all the way to this yellow